Previously on agentpalmer.com, inspired viewing awaits in 5 documentaries about art and artists. Chaotic, irrational, and brilliant, A Confederacy of Dunces takes you for a ride. And Tony still hasn't been over for chili, but we're working on it. This is the Palmer Files, episode 136, featuring Morgan from That Nerd Thing podcast. We discuss the origins of her show, compare her day job to her podcast, ponder the interchangeability of nerd and geek as terms, and much, much more. Are you ready? Let's do the show. Welcome to the Palmer Files. I'm your host, Jason Stershik, also known as Agent Palmer, and on this 136th episode is Morgan, host and producer of That Nerd Thing podcast. Morgan's here because as a person who talks to people as a psychologist by day and someone who chose a hobby like podcasting to come home to and talk to people at night, I was intrigued by someone as interested in the conversation of things as I was. You'll hear us discuss nerd versus geek and how the terms evolved from negatives to what they are today, as well as discuss just how many different things the word fantasy can conjure. Plus, we dive into the origins and behind the scenes of That Nerd Thing podcast, talk a little bit about perfectionism, reading, and uncover just how long Morgan's to watch, to read, to listen to list really is. All of that and a whole lot more is coming your way shortly. But first, remember that if you want to discuss the episode as you listen or afterwards, you can find all related ways to contact my guest Morgan and myself in the show notes. There, you can also find Morgan's Linktree with links to all of the things, which is linktree/thatnerdthingpod. And if you don't want to do that, just search That Nerd Thing on social platforms or the podcast app of your choice and look for the tagline, Voices of Fandoms. Don't forget, you can see all of my writings and rantings on agentpalmer.com. And of course, email can be sent to thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. So without further ado, let's get into it. Morgan, you host a podcast in your spare time when you're not being a psychologist. And that show is called That Nerd Thing. So... Yes. Why not geek?
That's such a good question. Wow. So I'm actually, I did not expect that question. So I think I always wanted, like, I always use the word nerd, like in my daily life. I just don't often use geek.
Okay.
And so it just naturally sort of happened.
Do you see a difference or interchangeable?
I think it's interchangeable. I have a segment of my show, like geeky recommendations. So I think it's all like it's interchangeable, whatever you want to call yourself.
Yeah, I immediately go back to, God, I don't know how long ago it was, because on the internet, everything's so fleeting. It could have been last week. I know it wasn't last week, but it also could have been 10 years ago or 20 years ago. But there was the geek versus nerd graphic in which geeks were more messy and more technical.
Yeah, I can see that.
And nerds were the other way. But as someone who's straddled that line back and forth, I take them individually. I also grew up in the 90s where, as a derogatory statement, you would hear both. Like I think it's only after the millennium and like younger kids maybe that can relate to this, where like you can really treat it as a badge of honor. But for me, at that time, when it was thrown at me, regardless of which one, it was like, oh, they're picking on me.
Yeah, no, I definitely think now being a nerd is considered cool, and people want to be a nerd because there's so, I was thinking about it on my show a few weeks ago with somebody, like, when did that transition happen? And I think a large part of it is the internet, people having more access to, other nerds. And I really think the Marvel movies kind of made it more mainstream to be nerdy.
See, I also think it, I think it is the internet, but I think it happened a little bit before Marvel. I think it happened in 2005. And I only say that specifically because I was a year out of college and I remember being addicted to fantasy sports. And the fantasy nerds or geeks or whatever that I would interact with were the jocks I had just graduated with, although I wasn't a jock, right? So it felt like, at least at that point, at that very specific point in time when fantasy had really, it had gone to Yahoo and ESPN had started doing their own, like it had become mainstream. And so the fantasy, which now is everywhere, like if you watch sports, they talk about it like on regular things. But back then it was just still this small corner that was growing. And I think that's when the term kind of started to bleed a little bit, because people would say like, oh, you're a fantasy geek. And then there's like somebody's ears perk up in the other side of the room. It's like, yeah, but I like Star Trek. And that's what you used to call me. Why does he get it now? Like, and I think that's kind of where, at least for older people, I guess I'll call them, you know what I mean? Like somebody who hadn't lived through that change. That's when I started to notice like, oh, these words mean they've changed.
Interesting. Yeah, I have like no interaction with this. So what, by fantasy sports, are you talking about like video games or like fantasy football?
No, I'm talking about like fantasy football, fantasy baseball, that kind of stuff. I mean, because that stuff goes back through like the early 70s when they were, the guys who started it were doing it with, paper and pencil and not automated on the internet. But yeah, I'm talking like actual, like, oh, well, we're going to fantasy draft whatever, and this is going to be my team, and keep an eye on the statistics. And I think video games helps too, because let's be real. Very few people I know that play sports games keep the rosters exactly as they are. They even do some trades for like players they like on other teams to get them on their favorite team. So the fantasy it's kind of all nebulous a bit, but I don't know. It's definitely changed, and it's not what it used to be. And I kind of almost feel like it's now too general of a term.
Which term?
Both
Fantasy?
of them. No, nerd and geek.
Yeah.
Although fantasy for that matter too, because now, based on just what I said, if I said, oh, I'm into fantasy, you have no idea if I'm talking sports, if I'm talking Tolkien, if I'm like...
That's where my mind goes. Like dragons and magic.
I think I still... I think it's been long enough now that those two definitions fight for what I'm actually thinking about whenever somebody says it. And then now I have to look for context. It's oh, great. Now I need more information. What are they actually talking about? Do they want to know about stolen bases, or are we talking about dragons?
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I think of nerd, I think about somebody who's just super passionate about something. So like whatever their passion is, they go all in and they love it.
But we all have so many of those things.
Exactly. We're all nerds.
But of course. But I feel like, and it's such a cop-out, but I've been thinking about selfishly, right? Okay, let's just fine. I'll be that guy. I was thinking about like, oh, well, if I was ever going to go on Morgan's show, what would be my thing? This is what I've been thinking about basically in prep for this conversation. Has nothing to do with what we're actually going to talk about, but I was like, well, what would be my thing be? And I think I could list 10 things that I would be able, at least 10 things that unprompted, with no notice, we could stop this recording right now and start recording your show, and I could talk about these 10 things. And if you gave me a week, I might be able to push it to 30, right? I'm not one dimensional. I don't know if anybody, first of all, I don't know anybody who is one dimensional, but I'm also like, I don't know that I can make that decision for myself. Now, I guess, asterisk, now. 20 years ago, I think it would have been like, here's 4 things I love.
Mm-hmm.
But we grow, and now it's like, well, I don't have a one thing.
Yeah. One of the things I do on my show is try to really understand somebody's like nerdy journey and, you know, where their nerdiness started and where it is today. So, you know, I'm going to ask you, what was the first thing that you were nerdy about?
Well, I will say the first time I identified as a nerd was 3rd grader me getting glasses.
Oh,
you
interesting.
Know, it helps, hurts, hinders, whatever, but putting on the costume really kind of amplifies the image. Okay. So 3rd grader me with glasses really is just kind of like, all right, this is it. No, I think you have to fast forward through all the awkward kid stuff to when you get to like 11, 12, 13, when you truly start making actual decisions. And I'm not a child psychologist, but like in my memory, I'm just doing kids things up until that point. Like, oh, friends are available. Cool. Oh, nobody's available. TV or book or, you know, it's just like whatever's available, that's fine. And then like somewhere between 10 and 13, you go like, I am actively deciding to take a role in what I'm doing. I would like to do this.
Yeah.
And I think for me, that was, at that time, it was collectible card games. And I would love to tell you that it was Magic the Gathering. And that was the first one. And I do still play, although I had a hiatus, and that's a whole different ball. But about 6 or 7 months after I discovered and started playing Magic the Gathering, Iron Crown Enterprises came out with a game called Middle Earth that did not do very well. But I was just as addicted to that as I was Magic at that time. And then I got into Spellfire, which was a TSR-based, very Dungeons and Dragons heavy collectible card game. And then I got into the Star Wars collectible. So at the time, the first thing was really, I can go there and I can play these card games. And then I hit the pedal and it starts to explode from there, because it goes, then I started getting into music and I started playing bass. And then I started running. And then I started reading, one of the many ebbs and flows in my reading or my being a reader, right? And so now we're talking about, I mean, we'll just flash forward a decade. 23-year-old me has a college degree, is still playing Magic, is still playing whatever instrument I can get my hands on, and is still running and listening to music and reading, right? It starts at 13, and it's kind of exploded more since then as I've gotten to drill it down more. But it's very much that first, like, it might be collectible card games.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I've never played any of those, but I've always been so intrigued by them.
I will say it, because of your show and the way you talk to people about fandom, aside from nerdery and geekery and all that stuff, fandom, I just look at Magic the Gathering and Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, all of the bigger ones, the newest one on the block, Lorcana from Disney. And I go, they're all different fandoms.
Mm-hmm.
And the only difference is there are more concrete rules to know than there would be if you just loved the MCU. Because unlike loving the MCU, where it's like, oh, here's 25 years of movies or whatever it is, and here are the 25 movies, there are thousands of cards. Here are the rules. This is the evolution of the rules, depending on when you started and how long you've been playing. And, oh, by the way, all of these little things have their own individual rules. It's a little bit more segmented. But from there, it's exactly the same. How do you feel about 2008's Iron Man? I don't know. How do you feel about this one card? Right? And now all of a sudden you've divided the room.
Yeah.
And so they're just more fandoms.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Although I could also go back further and say, like, yeah, but I've been a Baltimore Orioles fan since I was forever. I mean, 6 month me is in a baby seat in a jersey, right? So
yeah, maybe that's your first nerdy thing.
It might be, but at the time it wouldn't have been nerdy. I mean, this goes back to where we started with, when does it become nerdy to be like into sports?
Yeah. Well, I think it's more like these days, it's like, when is it like cool to be into it? And like being nerdy is being cool these days. I think people like it.
Yeah, but I also think it's how do I not be negative? I'm just going to be negative. I think, unfortunately, look, honestly, I've always been the one that, regardless of the blog and the podcast and all the people I've met through the internet, I'm still going to say I don't know that it was worth it. I'd still shut it off tomorrow if I could. Because the thing about the internet that brings you and me together, or me together with a Star Trek fan or a Star Wars fan or another Magic player, is also the same exact platform that allows the diehard Star Wars fan to say that Star Trek doesn't understand science fiction. And I've been toying with a blog post for probably 8 years now. And the reason I've been toying with it, and it hasn't been written yet, is because all I have right now is, why can't we all just get along? And that doesn't seem like that's a tweet, right? That's a status update. It's not a blog post. But I do think that the thing that does join us is also the same thing we use to divide ourselves. And I see both of those things equally when I'm scrolling whatever feed I happen to scroll, or just read blogs where people are like, yeah, this is great, but that other one sucks. It's like, hold on. You don't have to, this can be great without that other thing being even mentioned. But the internet has given rise to that kind of, I'm not allowed to, I'm not, like, it has to be binary, right? It can't just be singular. I like this. It also has to be, and I hate this. And that's where I'm like, nah, just shut it off. Go away. Go back to letters and phone calls.
I know, it's so easy for people to be so like full of hate and showcase that hate on the internet because they feel safe behind the screen to be able to do it.
Yeah. And this is the thing that frustrates me. They do it in the same breath as the thing that they love. Like, Marvel's a great, and maybe will become the answer when that younger generation of people are going for their doctorates and they need to write philosophy papers on like, well, what happened to Marvel as a society that we were watching these movies and enjoying them up through Endgame. And then we started putting women at the forefront of these movies, and the toxic masculinity within that specific fandom went, these movies aren't good because there's a woman, and there could be no other reason. And it's like, all right, well, I look forward to those people making those papers because they have to be written. In fact, they're probably being written now. But it just, look, I got 3 negative reviews on my blog. They were books specifically that I read that were so bad, I felt I had to actually say something. But if I don't like a movie, I just don't write about it. And I know I'm not everyone, but I just wish more people would just, okay, so you didn't like it.
Yeah, people can be really, really critical, like unnecessarily so. I definitely agree with that.
But I do have to, I want to get back to this. Your day job.
Mm-hmm.
You talk to people in your day job?
I do. I talk to people a lot.
And you decided that the best hobby you could come up with was to come home and jump on the internet and talk to more people.
So that's so funny. So yes, I talk to people in my job, but it's always about them.
Okay.
Yeah, it's never about me. And so, yeah, I decided I wanted to have a little bit more of like creativity and nerdiness and talk about not just like the people and their nerdiness in my podcast, but also I have an opportunity to kind of like fangirl out.
Okay. All right. And you decide, I mean, did you listen to podcasts?
I did. So I listened to 2 podcasts for almost like 20 years now. So I have like high standards, and I didn't want to do a podcast. Like I didn't want to host one. But my friend kept telling me like, Morgan, you really need to do a podcast. Like the way that I talk about them, the like standards I have, she's like, you should just do one. And I like, at first she was suggesting like I do one in the field of psychology, you know, similar to the way I work. And I was like, but that's not fun.
That's fair.
And then like one day I just was like, maybe like, okay, a nerd podcast could be fun. And I could talk to people about the things like nerdy things.
I mean, I don't want to put too fine a point on it, but does it juxtapose your day job in that like when people are talking about themselves, they're not always telling you their best moments. And then you get to go home and like talk to me about, I don't know, the Orioles won last night, or I read a good book from one of my favorite authors. And now it's me telling you happiness. Like, do you get a bit of juxtaposition?
That's interesting. I never thought about it that way. I mean, like in therapy, people are sharing, you know, a lot of their darkest parts of themselves and the pain that they go through. And we explore a lot of that. And I guess it is a little bit different, but I guess I viewed it less about talking to people and more about the opportunity to talk about fandoms that I love also.
Okay.
So like I don't generally have people on my show if there's nothing about them or the fandoms that they like that I have even like curiosity about, because otherwise it'll be boring to me. I have to have some sort of interest.
I would challenge you that if you're a curious person, you'll find it anyway.
Yeah, probably.
Like I could give you a list of 10 things and I would say, pick the one you think you don't like the most. Let's have that conversation. I think as a curious person, it may not, you might not pick up that book, that game, that, show. I still think you'd take away something from it. Like but I'm selfishly coming from a place where I get to talk to whoever, whenever, about whatever. And, I'm like you. I listen to podcasts for forever. And I took a middle step that you didn't. I got behind the scenes of some of my favorite shows. Like the independent ones that were like, we could use a volunteer, and then the volunteer becomes, now you're like a remote producer, and then, oh, now I'm a fill-in guest host occasionally, and
Cool.
serial guest. And so I had a lot more pressure from a lot more people going, you should start your own show. It's like, yeah, but I don't know what that'd be. I also needed that eureka moment of like, this is what it'll be. This is it. But I also had a job in marketing. So it was like, sadly, while marketing is an art, every professional will tell you it's all about the numbers. So it doesn't really matter. Like you could put out the worst piece of yourself, and if it got 100 clicks or 100 clicks more than the last one, that's a success.
Yeah. And
that's kind of why I hate marketing. Because it's just like, I want to put out my best. And if it gets listened to by 3 people, if 4 people click on my blog post, maybe I like that one better than the 100. You know? It's I don't know. But so you have this juxtaposition a little bit between your day job and I'm going to call it your night job. Cause look, I don't know. Anybody listening to this has heard me go on this rant before, but a podcast is not just record and release. So
it is way more work than I ever thought.
I mean, I do want to ask that real quick. Did you know? How much did you know about like the process of from record to release before, like, you know, you're like, I'm going to start this show. At that moment, what do you know?
Well, I think because I was listening for so long, like I've heard the podcasters that I listen to talk about the process. So I knew there was going to be editing and social media. But then I didn't realize, like, you know, it's stressful getting guests and making sure that they're able to record. So I have an episode that will come out, and the editing takes me way too long, but also
it'll get easier. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like way too long. And I was like, if I ever make money from the podcast, an editor is the first thing I'm hiring.
Is it?
Yes.
That is, I don't know. I mean, look, I can edit a show in about 1.5, 1.25 time. So we record for 90 minutes. It'll take me 2 hours.
I wish.
That's a rough estimate, right? Sometimes it's a little more, sometimes a little less. But that's now, right? When I started, we would record for 90 minutes and it would take me like 5 hours. A lot of that was because I would hate my voice and get up and walk away from the computer. Like, I don't want to do this. But it does get easier. But the reason I bring it back to editing is because I can't give editing up. Don't psychoanalyze me too much. It's too much control.
I get it.
Like, I'm here in the conversation with you. Even if the editor was silently on the line, in my head, I know I'm going to fix that. I'm going to take care of this. I know that. And so I have the final quality control on everything.
Yeah.
I don't know how people give that up.
Yeah, I get that. It takes me like 6 hours for 1 hour of recording. It's too much. It's way too much. I need to cut it down.
Yeah, we'll talk offline. I'll give you some tips. But I mean, that aside, how are you with guests? Like, because when you're in practice during the day, people come to you.
Yeah. When
you're the host and you have a guest-centric show, you have to go to them.
Yes.
When was the last time before the podcast that you had to actually go out on a regular basis and meet people and invite people to things?
Yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of like networking for my actual job, but that's very different.
It's the same though. You're still asking for the connection.
That's true.
Now the podcast is asking a little more of that connection. Can I have some of your time? But that initial ask, is exactly the same. So you had a little practice.
Yeah. But I think it's been not, I don't want to say easy, but I feel like people really like talking about themselves. And so, and the things that they love. So I feel like it's easier to get them to say yes to come on the podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. How did you come on to this? I said, hey, let's have a conversation.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
It's,
how did you find me?
One of the socials. I have no idea which one. I'm a lurker on all of them now because I haven't decided which one to invest in next.
That's something else I would hire out if I could. Social media manager.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, probably, but maybe not. I don't know. There's a part of me that I don't know when you lose the independentness of it.
Yeah.
And I'm not, I could say one of my fandoms is indie podcasts.
Cool.
It's probably not. It's probably that I just happen to know a lot of indie podcasters.
Yeah.
But I like the badge too much. Like, I want to know at what level, like, can I add a second person to help me before I become corporate? I don't ever want to become corporate. I don't care if I don't make any money. I just want to retain my indie status.
Yeah. I think if you have somebody who does your editing and social media, you're still like an indie podcaster.
Okay. I don't know what that.
I think so.
I don't. Yeah. It's a slippery slope. I'll say. All right. So you went to a school for a long time.
I did. Very long.
I'm going to go back to 2004. I finally get out of college. I'm done. I'm never going back to school. Okay? Now, granted, I graduated with a degree in communications and had no idea what I was going to do, but I was not going back to school. This is all I know.
Mm-hmm.
Mainly because, as a side note, to stretch this out a little bit more, I know that on campus, I was so comfortable not making any money, just learning and just being involved that I was like, if I do this for like grad school, I'll never want to enter the workforce. That's me. I get that. Uh-huh. When you finish your undergrad, do you know you want to keep going?
Yes. I knew pretty early on in undergrad that I wanted to be a psychologist.
Okay.
So that was kind of my path. And I went to a liberal arts college, so I was able to also like try out a lot of things. And so I felt pretty certain that I wanted to do something with psychology.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you need what? A master's and a doctorate.
So the program I went into was straight into the doctorate program where you get a master's on the way.
Okay.
Like in the program itself. Yeah.
And you were on board for like more school.
I feel like I would be on board for more school forever. If I could be a lifelong student, I would.
Okay. I mean, I would too, but I also know I'd just get complacent. I'd be like, what do you mean? Like, I don't have class today, so I'm just going to chill. Like, it's great.
Yeah. Well, a lot of grad school isn't just classes, but it was a lot of actually like seeing patients in clinics and getting supervised.
Practical.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And let's I guess wide swath, right? You probably had to do a lot of reading.
Yep.
Were you a reader all along?
Yeah, I've been reading like since I was like 4. I loved reading for fun. And then that stopped in college and grad school. I couldn't do it. And then it took a couple of years out of grad school for me to start reading again for fun.
How many books are you reading at a time?
It depends. Right now, probably about 2. I don't like to read a lot of different books at a time.
Yeah, you're talking to the one at a time guy.
Yeah.
Hi, it's me. No, I can read something else, but for pleasure, one at a time.
Yeah, usually one at a time.
Okay.
Yeah. for the most part.
Do you have a wheelhouse, or do you just are you all over?
I'm reading right now like fantasy, thriller, sci-fi, YA, young adult. That's like what I love.
No non.
No.
Okay. You're like,
Nope.
I'm done with it.
Yep.
Okay.
Occasionally I'll read like a psychology book, but no, it's not fun.
Okay. I think that replaced my my post undergrad schooling is
Yeah.
I always go back and forth between fiction and non.
Mm-hmm.
And I've kind of like taught myself things, mainly history. Cool. I haven't learned anything like you can learn some practical things from history, but not much. So that's where it's been. But I like you fell out of reading around that same time. It's like, it wasn't even an age thing. It was just like, these people are making me read stuff I don't want to read. So when I put this book I don't want to read down, the last thing I want to do is pick up a book at all.
Yep.
It's just, I'm just glad I got back to it. How did you get back to it?
So basically after grad school, a lot of like building a private practice and all of that. And then I had like a loss in my life that was pretty emotionally, rough. And so that's when I was like, okay, let me start doing things for myself that are fun. And I joined a book club.
Okay.
And that's when it just opened up a world of reading.
Did I ask this every time, and everybody says the same thing. And I really wish this wasn't the case. And I guess on a general scale, from the people you see in your day job, did you require the bad thing to happen in order for you to be like, nah, pump the brakes. Let's do something for me?
You know what? No, but it's more that the things that I felt like were for me shifted.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you weren't like all work, no play at that point. But
some of my work was play.
Okay.
And then, so before, I started the podcast, I was doing like outside of therapy, I was doing like online workshops about like perfectionism and all of that. So like that was more fun. I mean, now that I say that, I'm like, how did I find that fun?
I mean, it's okay. I mean, but it is like, especially if you get to be the person. No, I came, we're going to talk about perfectionism for a moment. I came to it. I have no idea where. It was in the ether, the air, the internet, I don't know what it was. And I still have it on a piece of paper. Perfection is the enemy of good. And so I've kind of kept that paper. I don't know what possessed me to write it down. Did I hear it in a podcast? Did I read it in a blog? Did I see it online? I think I had been hearing of this existence of the idea of perfection is bad.
Yeah.
And I just finally wrote it down and went, all right, time to move on.
Mm-hmm.
You're, I guess, giving lectures, explaining to people the same concept-ish?
Yeah. And teaching people where it might come from, different things they could do to work through it when they notice it in their lives. And it's like, that was kind of fun for me. And I also would do a lot of like workshops about burnout, how to prevent being burnt out. And part of that is recognizing what's important to you. And so I just, after experiencing that loss, I was like, well, this kind of stuff isn't as fun for me anymore. I'd rather,
okay.
It wasn't like making me money. So I might rather do another hobby that's more fun now, which is a podcast.
Okay. So then I'll put on my hat for a moment.
Okay.
Don't. I don't like don't. Hold on. I would caution you against making money from the podcast.
Oh yeah. I'm not doing
No. It's not about anything other than, I mean, I should say you have other hobbies though, right?
Yes.
So if the hobby podcast, the hobby podcast became a job, you have other hobbies to fall back on.
Mm-hmm.
But how big of a loss would the hobby of podcasting be if it became a job?
Yeah, that's something that I thought about a lot. Like what well, I actually went into it because I could get so focused in like that business world that I wanted to make sure that if I were to do a podcast, I would not care if it ever made money.
Okay.
I would do it even if nobody listened. Like I would want to make sure I had fun doing it. So I like, if I were to make money, it would be, well, like to pay for like an editor, social media. I mean, who doesn't want to make a little bit extra money?
I mean, that's fair.
But
I mean, I will say you're already a leg up on, I'll say 80% of all the other podcasters. And I'm sure you've heard the statistics already. 85% of podcasts don't make it to episode 10, and, a smaller percentage make it to 20, et cetera, et cetera. But for my money, if you set out to have fun and not make money, you're probably going to be a success.
yeah, that's my goal. Otherwise, I'm not going to do it if I'm not having fun anymore. Even if I was making money and not having fun, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, but it's not easy.
It's not.
So you talk to people all the time. Like, and now your podcast gives you a platform with which to talk. Are there any other platforms you want to take on? I mean, you already said that you were doing presentations and other speaking engagements.
Yeah, no, I'm good like with my therapy practice and then podcasts and then like other hobbies. Yeah.
That's it? You don't want to take on like time to write my book?
I would love to be an author. I would love to write a book, but I don't have a story to tell.
What?
I would need to have the story in my head I would have to feel inspired.
Okay, hold on. About 10 or 15 or 20 minutes ago, time doesn't matter in podcasts anyway, you said that you read fiction.
Yes.
When you talk about wanting to be an author, are we talking specifically about fiction?
Yes.
So you wouldn't write a nonfiction book?
No. Okay. I wouldn't. That doesn't feel fun. That feels like an academic paper.
That's the bad part of school.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not a fan of writing.
Oh, not at all?
Nope. Yeah, I don't really write.
Wow.
I mean, I write notes, like therapy notes, and that's
that's memory. That's
yeah. And then I mean, I'll do like some, marketing stuff, but that's it.
Okay. I don't meet many people that don't like writing. For one reason or another. I didn't know you existed.
It's not that it's like I don't dislike it. I just don't do it.
Okay. I mean, I guess that's you can't. I mean, it's the same thing, right? Like you can't like it if you don't do it, but if you don't do it, how can you like it? Mm-hmm. Did I say that right? I don't know. Maybe. Whatever. It's close enough.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah. Okay. So then, when you started your show, what's a fandom you wanted to talk about? I'm sure you've already covered it, but what was the number one fandom Morgan wanted to cover?
So, well, before I even started the show, I made sure I had my first 5 guests lined up.
Okay.
And it was also more in the beginning about the people. Like I really wanted to interview some of the podcasters that I was listening to for years. And so they said yes. That's been amazing. And then I had like 2 dream fandoms or guests. And one was Nick Walker from Hamilton. He played Aaron Burr in Hamilton, and he said yes, and he was on my show, and it was amazing. And then the other guest has not said yes. I don't think we'll say yes, but I have reached out. David Tennant.
Okay.
I would love to have David Tennant on my show, but I mean,
he probably had a lot more time during the pandemic than he does now.
I know. I know, because he had his podcast too. I met him at Florida SuperCon, like an autograph signing. It was really quick and stuff. And I gave him a little letter telling him about my show and how I want him to be on it. But I doubt he would have the time to do something like that. But
I mean, but you have to take the shot. And I think that's more than I can say for most. You have to be willing to fail, which I think goes back to your networking thing. One of the things that made this podcast so much easier to do was losing my job. Because in losing my job, I lost my job of 8 or 9 years before I started this show. If you think asking a guest, do you want to come on my podcast is hard, try asking someone for a job.
Yeah.
And you get that same kind of like, well, if these big corporations are going to just ghost me, why should I feel bad that one person ghosted me? I'll just keep asking.
Exactly.
But not everybody has that approach. So,
yeah.
I mean, where do you get? I'm just going to ask David. I'm just going to hand David Tennant a letter and ask him.
I mean, because I love my show so much and because I am so excited about it, I don't know. I guess I just want to ask. I have no problem asking. I'll ask anybody. Okay. If I want them on my show, I'll reach out. And I mean, I'll get disappointed if somebody says no, but I'll still I'll ask anybody.
Okay. Yeah, I know it was the worst that could happen, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm sure there's other people out there I can talk to. It's fine. There's more out there. Are you generally not that afraid of failure?
Not right now, but I think that's also from my own, going to therapy myself and working through fear of failure and all of that. And so I used to, but now not as much, because I will fail. I know I'll fail, and I'll figure it out from there.
Okay. Well, I only ask because when you hit publish on your first episode, and I'm thinking more episode 0, because that's the first you put it out. I know it's only a little bit of what this show's about to be, but it's very much okay, here's my pitch idea, but it's out there. It's the first thing. So now you get to see, in whatever your host is, what the download numbers are. Now you get to decide, okay, how much do I really care about if one person listened or if no one listened? Right?
Oh, yeah, totally. I do care about the numbers, but I try to really remind myself, okay, do I enjoy the podcast?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And look, I kind of envy you. Putting out an episode 0 probably would have been a smarter idea. I did an entire full-length episode on the idea of, should I even be doing this podcast?
Oh, I love that, though. That's so clever.
I didn't think it was clever. I just thought it was very meta and well, we'll find out how this goes.
Yeah, I did an episode 0 because one of my friends is Nicole from Fantasy Fangirls. They have a podcast all about Fourth Wing, the book series, and ACOTAR and all of that. And so she suggested I just put out a brief trailer episode just to make sure I know how to do it.
Yeah, that's fair. It's probably, I had a little bit of behind the scenes,
know-how. That's true.
But
you knew how to do it.
Yeah, but I will say, while we're still like, whatever you do seasons, take a break.
That's what I've been trying to think about. Like, do I want to take a few weeks off in December? What, like, I'm really thinking through that.
Yes. Yes. And probably more than a few weeks.
Really?
You're talking to a guy who was like, yeah, I mean, I got 4 blogs a week or 4 blogs a month. So 1 blog a week. That's fine. What can I add for the podcast? Like, oh, I'll add 1 every 2 weeks. That's fine. I can put out 6 things in a month. This is going to be, I don't know, well over 100. So it's been now years. I don't get a break because I never set up seasons. Like I never thought. And at this point, and I know people are listening that'll be like, well, just take like I'm too proud to do it. And at this point, what? Okay, season 1, episode 155, the finale. I'm going to take a little bit of break and we're going to come back with season 2, episode 1. Like, I think you need to establish seasons around like 52 or 50 or 40. Like, yeah, no, give yourself the break.
Yeah. Yeah. I have been thinking about that.
You should. You know, if you're having fun, you'll get back to it. I'm not, talking to you. I'm not worried you're going to just take a season break and not come back, which I've seen happen as well. There's a momentum shift, but a break might be nice.
Yeah. I was thinking even pre-recording just like a 5-minute little message that I could have release on my normal release days. So at least I'm still having like something.
Yeah. Although people told me my show would never work because it's not weekly. They'll forget about you in the off week. No, they won't. They'll just get used to listening to me twice a month. It's fine.
Yeah.
People are, and you know this. People are amazing.
Yeah.
And we don't give them enough credit.
Yeah.
Or maybe too much. See, now I'm already walking my statement back. I don't know. Do you? What's next for you? Just more shows, keep going?
I don't know. I kept telling myself I would do this for a year and then think through what I want to do next or what I want the show to look like. And so I'm still kind of in that stage right now of figuring out, like, I think I want to continue the podcast for sure. But I am thinking, like, do I still want to do it weekly? Do I want to do every other week? Do I want to do shorter episodes? So I'm not sure. I'm in that, like, thinking process right now.
I kind of envy you. It's a nice place to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I do that too, but it's also like, well, but you're
committed now.
I'm committed. The train's going. Like the momentum's there. Don't stop it. Have fun. Good luck. Maybe I should be on your couch. It's probably a different podcast.
Well, you're welcome on my podcast anytime.
Yeah, well, I got to get you that list and figure out what my fandom is.
I could show you my list of questions and you can see what feels right.
Okay. I mean, I'm pretty sure just like asking me my favorite album or my favorite movie, like it'll change. So like I'll answer your questions today and this will be the answer. And tomorrow I'll wake up and go, nah, I think I could do this other thing.
Yeah.
But we all have them. And I presume you will pick them up along the way, right?
What do you mean?
Like, I mean, people come on your show very passionate about this thing.
Oh, we talk about tons of things. You can't
check them all out, but you definitely have to have picked up a few things along the way.
Oh, yeah. My list of movies, TV shows, books, it's so long that my niece was listening to an episode. She's like, Morgan, do you really have a list that you're putting these things on? And I was like, you caught me because my list is too long at this point. But yeah.
I mean, are you tackling it at all?
A little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. Very slowly. But I mean, there's only so much time to be able to do all those things. Like, consume all that content.
No, it's true. And let's be honest, the amount of stuff that comes out, I think anyone who still has FOMO needs to be looked at for other reasons, because it's a full-time job if you're going to watch everything all the time, all the things.
Yep.
But you have it worse because you're asking people about their passions, which might be baggage from 30 years ago. You're asking people to open a can of worms that has nothing to do with what came out last week. Yep. And that's overwhelming enough.
True. I started keeping like a Word document, almost like my own personal podcast encyclopedia of every single nerdy thing that every guest mentions. And I figured it could be useful at some point in time. Yeah,
I think you should definitely put that in like one of those weird things that makes a tag cloud, as they used to be on a blog. And whatever gets to a certain number of recommendations should be like the threshold for like, all right, well, I'll try that. I mean, obviously, if you want to, tackle a movie, but like if it's a series, you should be like, well, it has to, enough people have to mention it first because it's 7 seasons and that's a haul.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm doing it. I took it upon myself. Self-promotion shamelessly. Like I wanted to learn about Star Trek because I didn't know anything about it. Culturally, I knew about it, but I never watched any of it. So I'm watching through all of it now.
Awesome.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
I'm on Deep Space Nine. So I've watched the original series and Next Gen and all the associated movies with those 2 series. Mm-hmm. But like, it's a lot. That's 7 seasons. And then I got Voyager up next, which is 7 more seasons. Yep.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Be careful. That's all I'm saying. Be careful.
Yeah.
Now seems like a perfect opportunity to state that, in a way, this entire podcast from episode 1 to now and beyond is my geeky, nerdy story. And it shouldn't come as a shock to anyone listening or anyone who knows me that this podcast and the blog that is its predecessor, which is also a part of my story, they will continue for as long as they will continue and will always be incomplete. I think perhaps as a healthy addition to perfection is the enemy of good, we should add that our stories will forever be incomplete. After all, that's life. There's always something more to do. So as we approach the holidays and the end of another calendar year, rapidly, I might add, since it feels like this year has flown by, I would urge you to spend a little more time with your own priorities, furthering your own story. Whatever that may be, more time with your social circle, more time with your to-read pile, more time with that hobby or home improvement, self-improvement, novel, script, album, whatever it is you're working on. These things that we undertake often fulfill us in ways other things can't, and we usually put them off, usually to the detriment of whatever it is, but also to the detriment of ourselves. So what's left to do, especially when it's something you want to do? Well, there's no time like the present to further your priorities and your story. Thanks for listening to the Palmer Files episode 136. And now for the official business. The Palmer Files releases every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. If you're still listening, I encourage you to join the discussion. You can find all related ways to contact my guest Morgan and myself in the show notes. There, you can also find Morgan's Linktree with links to all of the things, which is linktree/Thatnerdthingpod. And if you don't want to go there, just search That Nerd Thing on the social platform or podcast app of your choice and look for the tagline, Voices of Fandoms. The music for this episode was provided by Henno Heitur. Email can be sent to this show at thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. And remember, your home for all things Agent Palmer is agentpalmer.com. right, Morgan, do you have one final question for me?
What do you think is the most underrated thing that people should be nerdy about, but aren't enough people aren't?
Oh. I mean, that's underrated. I don't know. Curiously, now I'm struggling to figure out what underrated means. And I say that because it infers my answer, I guess. It informs my answer. You know, I have favorite authors. I don't think any of my favorite authors are for everyone. So I don't know that they're underrated unless, you know, I think for people my age, I'm 41, people around me. So anybody listening to this between the ages of like 32 and 50 should definitely read the works of Douglas Copeland. I don't care what book from Douglas Copeland you read. I don't care if you start with the one that started his career off, which is literally titled Generation X, or if you read Highly Inappropriate Tales for Young People, or Bit Rot, or J-Pod, or Microsurfs. I don't care which one you read. He's speaking to that generation. Anybody who's 32 and considered an old soul, or 40 like me, or 50 and is still in that weird, not quite a millennial, not Gen X exactly. He's underrated for that age group, regardless of where you find yourself, social status, or, you know, wherever. That's one. I also think that, I guess in the same vein as like Douglas Copeland, but more essay based, also sticking with authors I love, I would go with Chuck Klosterman's probably criminally underrated. People like me who know him love him, but I don't think enough people know him.
I haven't heard of him.
And he was, and what's funny is that Klosterman's last book, the first chapter, is about Copeland. So like it was a meeting of my two fandoms in like one singular chapter, which was odd, and I wasn't expecting it. But that's for people who read. Not everybody likes to read. So I would say in order to get the visual medium, everybody loves video. Video is the future. He says on an audio only podcast. I think Nebula, the streaming service Nebula. I don't care what you watch on Nebula, but as a company and as a collection of creators who are supported and nurtured to do what you and I do, but for video without the restrictions of YouTube. And look, all of their videos are also available on YouTube, but usually edited because of YouTube's regulations. But Nebula is probably that's my big one, I think, right now.
I haven't heard of it.
Yeah, there's a lot of there's a lot of creators you may or may have not have heard from YouTube that are on there, but they also do some independent stuff, and they finance some of these YouTubers to go make a movie or do a unique television series or mini series or whatever. And that's why they get my money, because I'm like, it's a media mission statement I can get behind, because they care about their creators, not so much the content. Like, the content is important, but they don't call it content. It's a video. It's a podcast. It's a movie.
Wow. Cool.
So that for me, that might be the big one.
Okay. That's a solid answer.
Yeah. It took me a while to get there, though. I got to get through like the things that I really like.
Yeah.
But that's the one. My show. No, probably not. Probably not. It's not underrated. I think I'm rated fairly. I believe. I don't know. I don't take stock of that really.
Yeah.
Maybe for my own mental health, I have no idea. Like, I guess I'm having a good time. I don't know what I'm rated.
Yeah. Yeah. I never like what you mean like on the charts or
On the charts. I mean, I know
Yeah.
there were charts. There are charts. There are multiple charts, and every platform has its own chart. And I have no idea where I rank, and I don't want to know.
Yeah.